So Bill, thank you for being here today. And I'm going to tell a little bit about you, and then I'll let you tell more about yourself. I know you were recently appointed to the position of Coordinator of Mental Health Accessibility, and that's been a position that's been of great interest to our organization because we think it can make a big difference in the long run for children and families in our whole system. So, as you know, I was part of a group of people who wrote your agency a letter about ways we want to work with you, but also some concerns we had. And I have really appreciated your openness and honesty in responding to that letter and just how you've responded to me and my questions. So I thought it would be wonderful if you could share some of those same things with the families of our organization and other people who are part of us. So that's why we asked you to do this interview today. So I'm just going to open it up and let you tell us a little bit about the position and also a little bit about you and what made you interested in this position and kind of how this came to be for you.
Dr. Hogge, thank you for the opportunity to speak with members of your organization today. I've enjoyed our conversations over the last several weeks since I've been appointed. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've worked at the Mississippi Attorney General's office for the past 10 years, and the last 5 of those years I've been assigned to the Department of Mental Health. I've been a part of the litigation team that has represented the state in the Olmstead litigation with the Department of Justice. I've also handled a variety of other matters, general matters for the department. I've worked with the forensic service at Mississippi State Hospital closely and been of general counsel to the State Board of Mental Health. I was appointed to my current position on October 15th, and I began work in the position on November 1st. So if I may just tell a little bit about the position. The coordinator of mental health accessibility is to perform a comprehensive review of the state's mental health system. That includes children's services, core adult services, community-based services, whether they're offered at a community mental health center, in jails. It also includes the intellectual and developmentally disabled, the institutions, the state hospitals. It's very wide-ranging in the areas of review. The legislation asks that the system, the mental health system, the structure of the system be looked at, and also the delivery of services to people that have been discharged from state hospitals, and also those that are at risk or at serious risk of institutionalization, particularly those with serious mental illness. So it's a very wide range of areas that we'll be looking at.
Okay, and I appreciate that overview. And I know a lot of this language will become more and more familiar the more and more involved you get in working with people and different organizations. Are you familiar with the idea of person first language? Has that come up at all?
I've heard of person-centered a lot, and that's a term that's used. I don't know that I've heard of person first.
And person-centered is very important too. And this is just in doing this work, especially on the ground level, that's person first language is the idea of people are always people first and then their disability. So like someone with an intellectual disability, referring to them as a person with an intellectual disability, as opposed to sometimes people are referred to like as if their disability is them. So that's just in conversation, something we like to throw out there, and I think is important as we keep working together. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But I really appreciate the overview. And you know, because we've talked honest about it, that, and probably other people have had the same concern. When I first found out you were appointed to this position, I had some concerns because since you had that close working relationship with the Department of Mental Health, wondering, how you would ensure your objectivity in this new role, and also because state agencies can be influential, and the Department of Mental Health has quite a footprint in the state, concerns about, did they help you get this position, those kinds of things. And you and I have had some really candid discussions about that have helped me understand that better. So can you comment just a little bit on that?
Certainly. First, I would like to address that from just looking at the legislation on its face, and the bill that created my position, and I was appointed by the Director of Finance Administration, Liz Welch, and the bill is curious in that it gives certain authority as it relates to my position to the Department of Finance Administration, and it gives other authority to the State Board of Mental Health. I'm in the process of trying to interview people for my staff. It's very important to me that we have a variety of people with experience in the mental health field and community-based mental health services, advocates, people that can help in our efforts to reshape the system. And under the current legislation, the State Board of Mental Health has to approve all of the hires. But like I said, I serve at the will and pleasure of the DFA Executive Director. I'm going to be asking the legislature to change that in this upcoming session to where the State Board of Mental Health will not be able to approve my hires. The funding for my position is obviously provided through the legislature. I don't serve at the will and pleasure of anyone employed by the Department of Mental Health or anyone on the State Board of Mental Health. So I think looking at the current legislation on its face, I think it's a very good bill. I think that it allows investigation into essentially every area of mental health services in our state. But again, the thing that I don't like about it is that my hires have to be approved by the State Board of Mental Health. Now, I will say, and I think that this should serve as some assurance as well, I don't believe that the Department of Mental Health would have any opposition to that language coming out. So I'm hopeful that that change can be made. And just in terms of the legislation on its face, I hope that that can be resolved, and there won't be any reason for concern there going forward. Of course, the legislature coming back next month, so I hope that can be dealt with. In terms of my background, my experience with the Department of Mental Health, I don't think there's any organization that could have experience with any organization could have better prepared me for my current position than working closely with the Department of Mental Health over the last 5 years. The mental health field is it's a very unique area. I think I've said before, I think it would be very much of a disadvantage to put anybody in this position that did not have experience in the mental health field. I have again, like I said, been on a litigation team that represented the state in the litigation of the Department of Justice. I started with representing the Department of Mental Health in 2015. The complaint was filed in the case by the Department of Justice of the United States in August of 2016. So I've had the opportunity to see that, to negotiate with the DOJ lawyers and be a part of that process since even before the complaint was filed. So I think that's very valuable experience. Can I totally, resolve everybody's concerns 100%, of any bias towards the department? All I can give you is my word, but I will be an independent evaluator, and I don't have any bias in favor of the department. And I've never worked directly for the department. I think that should be pointed out too. I've always been employed by the Attorney General's office.
And I don't think I ever told you this. Somebody else might have, but after we wrote that letter, the Department of Mental Health, their administration did contact us and say that they had nothing to do with you getting this position. And I think they were probably found out maybe even after we did. I mean, they didn't seem to have advanced knowledge, but
yeah, and I can share with you, as I've done in the past, that I'm not aware of any recommendation that I received by the department to get this position. Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And I really appreciate that. I do think, that I've appreciated your openness in looking at that thus far, because I think that would always be challenging with people you've been around and you've worked with, even if you weren't working for them.
Certainly. And again, I think that the experience with the Department of Mental Health is invaluable. I have appreciated their continued willingness to meet with me and have discussions with me since I came into the position, as do I appreciate, your candor as well. So, I think it's a benefit, and I think as we go through this process, people will recognize it, including persons receiving services. I think will recognize my experience there as a benefit.
Okay. All right. And you've mentioned some things that you're starting to do, like looking for staff and all that, which would make sense to get going. But what do you see as some of the other, most important first steps now that you've had this job at, what is it, a little bit over a month, and part of that was Thanksgiving. So what do you think is important next steps?
Well, I appreciate the letter that you sent, and copied me on identifying areas of concern. I think all of the areas that you identified are legitimate, and they should be considered, and they should be studied. And that's what we're going to set out to do. The lawyer in me would say that my first responsibility, or my most important responsibility in my position, is to do what the legislation requires me to do. And what it tasked me with is performing I think I said this earlier, a comprehensive review of the state's mental health system, look at the structure of the system, look at the delivery of services, and the authority I have. People say, well, what authority do you have? The authority that I have is to make recommendations to the state leadership, to the Department of Mental Health, to the peer committee about changes that can make the system better. That's the extent of my authority. I can't make the changes myself. Again, trying to look at the legislation, the intent of the legislation. I think it's apparent to those that have reviewed it. The legislation has a heavy emphasis on community-based services.
Yes.
I think the future of I think it's the future delivery system of services in our state. So, again, trying to look at the intent of the legislation, I think that's where we have to start. And really every service, other than hospitalization, involves or is potentially community based, and even if you look at somebody, if they're involuntarily civilly committed, there's still a lot of involvement from community providers in doing a pre-evaluation screening, and also planning with the state hospital as to discharge, after the person is committed. So I think that, the obvious starting point is to, look at the community-based services that are offered. Of course, the community mental health centers are required to provide core services as defined by the Department of Mental Health and their operational standards. But, also are they providing services that are the most effective for the person that's receiving the service. So I think that we have to look at those things first. I think that's our starting point. And I think that, again, if you're reading the legislation, I think that's a very natural starting point.
Yeah, and the legislation's kind of fascinating. It's I think it's well written, and that's no big surprise when you look at Hogge Bryant was the one who sponsored it, and he's a brilliant man and knows a lot about mental health. It's also fascinating to me kind of what happened to it as it went through committee. So it's got a few twists and turns that are interesting, just like what you brought up about the shared responsibility between two state agencies, and it would probably be better if it's under one. And I am glad, and I told you this, that part about looking at the structure of our overall system is in there as part of what you look at in your role. And because we've had discussions about this, that our organization believes that that's a very important piece of this, because if those community mental health centers don't have the support and infrastructure they need with all the parts working together, it's hard for them to provide any services. But I also appreciate your emphasis on what the services should look like, because if they're not helping people who are receiving them do what they want to do and be able to live in the community in the way they want to and in the way that's meaningful to them, then we're not doing what we need to do as a state or as a system. So it's a daunting but really exciting challenge that you have ahead of you. And I am very grateful for how open you've been to looking at the information we've shared. And there's probably people out there watching this who are thinking, oh, that poor man, Joy gave him a bunch of stuff to look at, because we're kind of an unending supply of some of those documents. And we'll probably share some of those with this when we share this video, so people will know what we're talking about, because most of those came from the Attorney General's Mental Health Task Force. But I really appreciate you going through those. And I will say you are the only person who called me on the day before Thanksgiving to tell me you were studying the things that we had shared. So that was a very nice phone call to get and a great introduction to working with you. And that's one way organizations like ours, NAMI, the Association of Mississippi Peer Support Specialists, groups that are made up of people receiving services. The Coalition for Citizens with Disabilities is a more broad-based one, as well as grassroots groups that work on rights, like disability rights. And there's other ways we can support you and work with you, but I'm just curious if you have any thoughts yet about ways that you think organizations like ours and you can work together to make sure that your work is as effective as possible, and ways that we can be helpful to you.
Well, thank you for your interest in doing that. The ultimate, interest in this is to make the system better for people, for the people receiving the services. If there is a breakdown in the delivery of services to the individual, it's very important that we hear what that breakdown is from the person receiving the service. Is there, are they having difficulty in accessing community mental health centers? Are they having difficulty with medication and getting their medication? How does the system serve them? What's the experience like on their end? How can we make it better for them? So that's a very, very significant interest that I have. In terms of getting in touch with me right now, as we said, we're just I don't have staff yet by myself right now, but I think that's hopefully going to change very soon. Um, um, Anyone is welcome to email me with their concerns. My email address is bill.rosamond@dfa.ms.gov. That's the best way to get in touch with me. As we hire staff, there may be additional ways to get in touch with me. And I certainly don't mind talking with consumers, but just uh, in terms of making the process efficient for everybody, and also enabling me to study the system and investigate it thoroughly. I think that would be the most efficient way for everybody to get in touch with me.
Okay, and I see Todd just put your email up there so people can copy it down. And I know you've been quite responsive to email when I've emailed you. And one thing I wanted to make sure we went over real quick before we end is, can you explain a little bit about how what you're doing coordinates with the mental health lawsuit that the state is facing and what's going on with that?
Certainly. So like I said, I've been, at the table, so to speak, in the lawsuit from the beginning. I'm not counsel. I've never been counsel of record in the lawsuit, but I have been involved in defending the lawsuit from day one up until, October. So my role changes. Again, looking at the legislation, the intent of the legislation, it allows me to confer with the special master and any court-appointed monitor that may be eventually appointed in the case. That's the only thing it mentions about my role in the litigation. I take that to mean that my role should primarily involve implementation. We will certainly be making recommendations to improve the mental health system. We want to make sure that none of those recommendations would conflict with any things we would be required to do by court order. We certainly don't want to waste resources in an area where they wouldn't be effective, looking at what something the court might require us to do. So that's my main role. Certainly intend to stay on top of the where we are with the lawsuit and the status of the negotiations. But as far as actively negotiating for the state in the lawsuit, or conferring with the judge, I would certainly provide assistance if asked, but I don't see that as my role.
Yeah, and we would encourage that not to be your role, because the state lost that lawsuit and we felt like that was justified. So,
well, it's important to remember, though, that there's not been a final order entered in the lawsuit. The court entered an order in I believe it was September 2nd, 2019, finding the state in violation of Title II of the ADA, and further requiring the state and the Department of Justice to work with the special master, who's since been appointed, Dr. Michael Hogge, to craft a remedial plan. And there was a status conference, as you know, that was held a couple months ago, that was open to the public, and the parties represented that they felt like that they would be wrapping up negotiations by the end of this year or the first of next year, to the extent that things could be agreed upon. I'm probably going beyond your question, but I think it's worthwhile that if the parties can't fully agree, then the special master's role changes to he would submit his own recommendation, and Judge Reeves would adopt that in whole and part. Not at all. That would be up to the court. But that's where we are right now. That's where the state is right now in the lawsuit.
And if you saw me kind of smile or almost laugh at the beginning of what you were saying, I was not laughing at you. September 2nd is my wedding anniversary. And I remember when that ruling came out, but I forgot it was on September 2nd. And I was thinking, well, that's one of the weirdest anniversary gifts I ever got, just because that happened that day. And
Yeah.
And I'm sure you understand all the ins and outs and the steps and all that better than I do because you are an attorney. So I get that. I guess my main thing would be, on behalf of our organization, we would tell you that the system is not meeting the needs of our children, and probably not the needs of people receiving services in general, but I can't really speak beyond our population. So that is important. It's also important that the people who are receiving the services be at the table. That decisions should not be made without them. So we appreciate your willingness to work together on that. And another thing we think about and talk about as an organization is the system we have. Sometimes we spend a lot of time thinking about, as a state, improving the system we have. And maybe the system we have isn't the one that we need. So just what are the possibilities? And you and I have talked a little bit, like things like integrated care and all that. And I realize some of that probably goes way beyond the scope of what your work will be over the next year or even the next few years, but on down the road. But just that those things are all really important to keep in mind. No lawsuit, but the lawsuit probably gave an impetus for a lot of changes that might be possible, and probably were an inspiration for the legislation that made this position possible. So those are just some thoughts. And is there anything I didn't ask that you wish people knew or you didn't get a chance to share, or anything I said that you'd like to respond to that hit you a certain way?
I don't think so, but I did briefly mention at the start of our conversation, or maybe I didn't. I've served with the Attorney General's office for 10 years. My last 5 were with the Department of Mental Health. My first 5 were with the Department of Human Services. So I share your interest certainly in children's services. We've been at this for about a decade now with the Department of Justice. There have been services implemented since that time. There have been services implemented, in our state that maybe aren't provided in other states. There's no uniform path here. So, I think it's exciting in the sense that, there's a lot of opportunity to improve a mental health system. And my intent is, while we certainly have to be mindful of the lawsuit, any further court ruling we might receive, my desire is to improve the system, outside of the lawsuit. There are a lot of new ideas out there. What can we do better? What can we offer in our state? Maybe we haven't in the past, and how can we give the assurance that what we're offering is a quality service, and we're serving absolutely everybody that we can with that service. So
we're certainly with you on that, and I really appreciate you doing this today. We've had a lot of opportunities over the years to get information out to families and have people sit down and talk with families, and I got to be really honest with you. It has been rare, if ever, that was, as far as mental health goes, like someone from the state side. And I know you're not representing the state, but it is your candor and your openness in doing this is very, very much appreciated. So I just want to thank you again. And again, people can email you if they have feedback they'd like to give you. And I just for being here, Bill.
Well, thank you. And it's been a pleasure working with you thus far. And I'm very excited that, your organization and a number of stakeholders, in the state system, are interested in working. And one of the things that I feel like my office hopefully can do is bring the groups together and hopefully try to improve the system. But we're certainly there to communicate and try to learn about how the public views our system and how we can make it better for them.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you as well.